At 55 years old, Shaunie Henderson found herself standing in the middle of a storm she never thought she would face. For years she had been celebrated as a strong woman, a voice of influence, and even a faith figure who inspired people. But you won't believe how quickly all of that began to change. The woman who once shaped reality TV, who later reshaped herself as a figure of empowerment, was suddenly being called out in a way that shook her entire image. And the person behind this storm was no ordinary critic. It was none other than gospel powerhouse Leandria Johnson, a woman whose voice was powerful not only in music but also in speaking truth without holding back. This confrontation was not small or simple. It was loud, it was bold, and it exposed things many believed Shaunie had successfully hidden. Shaunie had always managed to control her public story, from the days of Basketball Wives to her shift into church spaces. But here's the shocking part. This time she wasn't controlling the story. The story was controlling her. Leandria Johnson had stepped into the spotlight not with a song, but with words that carried weight. And the more she spoke, the more people began to question if everything Shaunie had built was nothing more than a performance. To really understand why this moment hit so hard, people had to look back at who Shaunie was. She wasn't just Shaquille O'Neal's ex-wife. She wasn't just the producer of a reality show filled with fights and drama. She had built herself into a cultural force. She used Basketball Wives to move from being a name connected to Shaq to a woman who owned her own spotlight. This is how she became respected, even feared in the entertainment industry. But things shifted years later when she decided she no longer wanted to be seen as a drama maker. She wanted to be recognized as a woman of faith, family, and inspiration. She positioned herself as someone who uplifted women, who spoke about grace, strength, and transparency. She did what many in entertainment could never do. She successfully rebranded herself. She went from being linked to scandal and reality TV chaos, to being invited to church pulpits, women's conferences, and faith-based stages. For a while, it worked. People believed it, people respected it. But all of that careful work began to crack when Leandria Johnson opened her mouth. Because Leandria was not afraid of backlash. She wasn't worried about protecting a brand. She had always lived in raw honesty, sharing her flaws, struggles, and pain. That made her words carry a power no polished image could fight. Destiny took an unexpected turn when these two women collided. What started as just another day at an industry event suddenly became a confrontation people would talk about for weeks. Leandria didn't just question Shaunie, she exposed the cracks in the image Shaunie had worked so hard to build. And once those cracks were exposed, people couldn't stop looking deeper. Suddenly the woman who once stood untouchable was now standing at the edge of cancellation, and the world was watching closely. At that private event, the atmosphere had first been calm, smiles, flashing cameras, and flowing conversations. But the moment Leandria stood up, the energy shifted. Eyewitnesses said the room went silent as if everyone knew something serious was about to happen. Shaunie had just been speaking about authenticity in leadership and the importance of being transparent in faith communities. To the crowd, it sounded polished and inspiring. But to Leandria, it was pure hypocrisy. She built her reputation on calling out fake perfection, and she wasn't about to let Shaunie slide. Leandria questioned Shaunie directly, asking how someone who made millions from Basketball Wives, a show built on drama, humiliation, and tearing women down, could now stand on stages preaching about values and faith. People in the room froze. You won't believe how bold she was. She didn't soften her words, she didn't hold back, and she didn't care who was listening. Shaunie tried to remain calm, answering with grace. She said people could grow, that the past didn't define her, and that she had worked to become a better version of herself. But Leandria didn't stop there. She reminded everyone that growth without accountability wasn't growth at all. She asked if Shaunie had ever apologized to the women humiliated on Basketball Wives. She asked why Shaunie spoke so easily about grace and forgiveness now, but stayed silent when those women carried the pain of her show's toxic culture. The craziest part is that people in the audience began nodding quietly, as if Leandria was saying what many had thought but never dared to voice. Shaunie was caught off guard. She had always controlled her image, but in that moment, she had none. She tried to defend herself, but her words sounded weak compared to Leandria's raw fire. Whispers soon spread that Leandria wasn't the only one who felt this way. Behind the scenes, many gospel singers and faith-based leaders had been saying the same things about Shaunie. Leandria was just the one bold enough to say it out loud. By the time the night ended, the confrontation had spilled beyond the walls. Phones had recorded clips, small, grainy, incomplete, but enough to show Shaunie's discomfort and Leandria's passion. Within hours, those clips spread online. What started in a single room was now exploding worldwide. By the next morning, whispers had become headlines. Shaky clips of Leandria's fiery words and Shaunie's tense reactions flooded Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. People replayed the fragments again and again, filling in the blanks with their own assumptions. Within hours, hashtags like #Shaunie exposed and #Leandria speaks truth were trending. Suddenly, Shaunie's carefully polished reputation was being ripped apart in real time. Old interviews resurfaced. Past basketball wives clips reappeared. Long-buried controversies returned to the spotlight. People compared her faith-driven speeches to her reality TV past, asking if her rebrand was just an act. But what hurt Shaunie most wasn't the criticism from strangers. It was that even some of her supporters began to question her. Fans of gospel music rallied around Leandria, praising her bravery for saying what others had been too afraid to say. They called her authentic, real, and fearless. Meanwhile, Shaunie's defenders argued she had the right to grow, and that dragging her past was unfair. But the conversation was unbalanced. For every voice defending Shaunie, 10 more called her out. Destiny took another turn when the controversy started affecting her career. Rumors spread that faith-based conferences, where Shaunie was supposed to speak, were quietly reconsidering her invitations. Some sponsors tied to her inspirational brand began pausing their deals, not wanting to get caught in the backlash. For Shaunie, whose second career was built on image, influence, and church connections, this was dangerous. When money and partnerships start pulling away, controversy doesn't just live online, it reshapes real life. What began as a confrontation in one room had turned into a full-blown public reckoning. Thousands now waited to see how Shaunie would respond. Would she fight back, or would she stay silent? The world was watching, and every move she made was being judged. For the first time in her long career, she wasn't the one shaping the story. The story was shaping her. On one side, her loyal supporters defended her right to evolve from her past. On the other, critics demanded she admit her role in years of drama and exploitation. But this wasn't just about Shaunie anymore. It had become a bigger conversation about faith, fame, and accountability. Audiences no longer accept images at face value. They demand proof behind them. And in 2025, people are far less forgiving when they feel someone is only performing authenticity instead of truly living it. Shaunie had carefully rebuilt herself as a woman of grace, faith, and leadership. But Leandria's words pulled the curtain back, exposing the gap between image and reality. Leandria, with all her flaws, had credibility through honesty. She had nothing to hide. Her raw truth clashed with Shaunie's polished perfection, and the audience decided who felt more real. Most celebrities can ride out backlash, but Shaunie's place in both entertainment and church culture made her more vulnerable. She was judged as a celebrity, as a faith leader, and as a woman of influence all at once. Male producers who built careers on messy TV were rarely held to the same standard. But as a Black woman navigating two powerful worlds, the judgment on Shaunie was twice as sharp. And so the possibility of redemption now hangs in the balance. If Shaunie ignores the criticism, the storm could swallow her whole. But if she shows true humility, admits the pain caused by her past, and faces the questions directly, she might turn this controversy into a redemption story. After all, the public loves nothing more than watching someone rise again, if they first admit their truth. That leaves one final question: will Shaunie Henderson finally confront the reality behind her image, or will she cling to the mask that has protected her for so long? Because in the battle between truth and reputation, only one survives, and the world is waiting to see which one Shaunie will choose.